What's good? This is another episode of Sensible Reactions. We're about to get into episode 8. This is the consciousness, which I'm very, very excited for and ready to learn about because let's do it. You know what I'm saying? As always, balanced, balance, balance as always. Because if you don't know, baby, I'm all about balance. Be Nietzsche. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, stick around. Okay? Stick around. We're about to go ahead and get into this episode. I'm not gonna hold y'all up. I'm all about though learning about consciousness. I've been doing quite a few things over the time, especially along my spiritual journey. Boy, I tell you, yeah, when you become aware, sometimes you just know too much. That's very possible to just know too much. But hey, you know, it is what it is. Let's get into the episode. Let's see what's to it.
Here's a riddle, my hobbits is. What's something that we all experience all the time that we can't really measure and barely have words to define? You can't hold it in your hand or take a bite out of it. It isn't something you learn or practice. It just is. Consciousness. Every science has certain concepts that are so fundamental yet abstract that we have a hard time finding the appropriate words to describe them. Ask a physicist and they'll tell you energy and space defy simple definitions. Biologists know if something is alive but have a harder time explaining what life actually is. Ask a psychologist what consciousness is, and you'll get a slippery
Is it not self-explanatory then? If you know what alive is, then okay, all right.
answer. For the purposes of this conversation, we're going to actually loosely define consciousness as our awareness of ourselves and our environment. It's this awareness that allows us to take in and organize information from many sources and
I mean, that's the sum up. You ask me, especially when you get on the side spiritually, and you tap into the Momo. But from a basic standpoint, to me, this is what woke means.
senses at once. American psychologist William James thought of consciousness as a continuously moving, shifting, and unbroken stream, hence the term stream of consciousness. Others think of it as the brain's roving flashlight shining down an unbroken beam of light that highlights one thing then moves to the next. The point is your conscious experience is forever shifting. For example, right now, hopefully you're focused on the words coming out of my mouth, but with a little shift, your mind might wander to how you really should probably shower today, and your chair's kinda uncomfortable, and you suddenly have to pee. And can you believe what Bernice said? Do I smell pizza? Hey, eyes here, we're learning. Beyond that moment-to-moment shifting, consciousness allows us to contemplate life, think about infinity, and ride a unicycle across a tightrope while juggling melons. At least in theory. Our consciousness helps us plan our futures, consider consequences, and reflect on the past. It is both the most familiar and the most mysterious part of our lives. Kinda like the Force, but for the little universes inside our heads.
Yeah, it's always gonna be interesting to see how, like he said, different people from different sectors describe it.
Flip back and forth between various states of consciousness, including waking, sleeping, and various altered states. These can occur spontaneously, like dreaming, or be physiologically sparked, like a drug-induced hallucination, or be triggered psychologically, through meditation or hypnosis, for example. We're going to take the next 3 episodes to look closely at these different states of consciousness, but let's start with what it really means to be awake. For centuries, scientists learned what they could about the brain solely through clinical observation. And they learned a lot, for sure. But with today's technology, we're actually able to see some of the structures and activity inside a living, working brain. Its electrical, metabolic, and magnetic signatures displayed on screens for our wonder and amusement. The field of cognitive neuroscience is the study of how brain activity is linked with our mental processes, including thinking, perception, memory, and language. Like other kinds of neuroscience, it uses neuroimaging technologies to consider links between specific brain states and conscious experiences. And there's more than one way to scan a brain. Structural imaging shows the brain's anatomy and is useful in identifying large-scale tumors.
And this is what I was talking about in my book, The Human Body, that I have. If you don't know, thrift books, bro, I think it was thrift books, and it's another website where I got my books from. You can find some good stuff on there. What I said is the body ain't gonna change. So, I mean, that's a book that's gonna be as up to date as possible for, you know what I mean? So, some books are a little bit out of date. depending on what you're looking for. And some, it don't matter in regards to timing, but I have books for like $8, $4, but they are definitely helpful. Excuse me, and that's what I was talking about in the books. I learned about all the different. I'm not fully retaining information at this time, like because it's a lot of. So it's there for reference. You know what I'm saying? I'm not here to remember everything. That's why I bought the book, for reference. So in the book though, it shows the different type of tests that I was explaining, and it really helps you learn what you need to be asking for so that you know how you can go about finding out about the specific area that you're having an issue with. So it's always good to know what you need, because they may be giving you a test for something that's not even related to the body part, or it can't even show you. The test they're running cannot even show you what it is that you need to be seeing, because that's not the right type of test, you know.
Diseases and injuries. In contrast,
and don't be scared to talk to your doctor, and also replace your doctor.
functional imaging shows us electromagnetic or metabolic activity in the brain, like blood flow, to let us observe correlations between specific mental functions and activity in particular brain areas. So yes, neuroimaging has been revolutionizing the field of psychology, much like telescopes and microscopes did for astronomy and biology. But on the other hand, some of this technology is very new, and there's plenty of disagreement about how to interpret neuroimaging findings. Remember, correlation does not equal causation, so activity in a certain brain region, while having certain kinds of thoughts, might be useful to know, but it's not the end of the conversation. We've already talked a lot about how function is often localized in the brain and how
that too, boom, you might need multiple tests, which is why it's good to know what. All right.
how everything psychological is simultaneously biological, so it stands to reason our thoughts and emotions could in part be illustrated by a bright flare on a dark screen. We've also collected a fair amount of evidence that we don't just have one layer of consciousness, a single tape playing various tunes, but rather something more like two layers, each supported by its own personal bio-psychosocial pit crew. I'm talking about one of the dual process models of consciousness. The idea that our conscious, deliberate mind could be saying, look, a squirrel, while our implicit, automatic mind is simultaneously sub-processing like a computer. Color, brown, tail, bushy, movement, climbing, distance, 20 meters, association.
So that goes back to what I was talking about in a previous episode of the conscious and subconscious mind. I think that's the time where I was explaining about the book that I was reading. Success Without a College Degree. It's a good book. It gets into the mind, the psyche of kind of how you are perceiving yourself more so than anything.
My sister had a squirrel phobia as a child. Implicit bias. I think that squirrels are ruining America, all of which might weigh upon my behavior upon seeing the little guy. By some estimates, all your different senses are scooping up nearly 11 million bits of information every second, and yet you consciously register only about 40 at a time. So how do we keep focused?
That's just like right now in that moment. Don't mean to pause as much, but that's just like right now in that moment we said it makes you have a certain correlation, because the last place that I was living at, I could swear it was a squirrel in the attic. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if somebody passed in that house or what, or if it just was a different kind of situation. It was just an older house, but something was in those walls and in that attic, all right? And nobody could ever find none. They said they see little droplets, they see this, but nobody ever knew. You know what I mean? Nobody ever found anything. So yeah, it's definitely a correlation that I had in my mind for a long bit, that me and squirrels, every time I see them, I used to get irritated. Now, my relationship with squirrels are a lot different.
and filter out all that chatter to actually get stuff done. With selective attention, of course. Selective attention is how we focus our consciousness on one particular stimulus or group of stimuli, effectively tuning out the rest. Your consciousness is like a spotlight on a busy stage. There are other things going on around you that your automatic sub-processor brain is covertly registering, but for those moments when you shine your spotlight, most of the other stimuli fall away. Try it at home! Right now, you're consciously watching this lesson on consciousness. You probably don't notice the feel of your socks on your feet, or the tongue that's inside your mouth, always filling up your mouth with tongue. But as soon as I mention it and the spotlight of your attention turns to them, you feel those socks on your feet, and you're like, wow, it's weird that there's a tongue in my mouth. The classic auditory
It was weird how you said tongues filling up your mouth.
example of selective attention is the cocktail party effect. You could be in a room with 47 people jabbering away and yet be able to concentrate your hearing on one conversation, tuning out the rest of the voices and the background music. But if the couple next to you were to speak your name, suddenly your cognitive radar would light up and your attention would whip around to the sound of your name, probably trying to figure out if Bernice was talking behind your back again. Bernice! This roving spotlight of selective attention is pretty handy most of the time for spies and laypeople alike, but it can also be dangerous if you're being dumb and, say, texting and driving. When you shift your primary selective attention from driving to OMG lol 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 lol, you also unwittingly activate your selective inattention, which means that you failed to see that cyclist who you almost ran over, which would not only have ruined her life, but also yours. So don't text and drive. In fact, when your full attention is directed elsewhere, you'd be astounded by the scope of obvious things you failed to notice. It's called inattentional blindness. You may
Cause baby, it's a lot of y'all who got unintentional blind. Y'all need to get it together, especially walking in public. Cause I don't know what be wrong with some of y'all people, but I'm telling you now, y'all need to get it together. You need to focus up, baby. Okay? Focus up.
have even already been subject to one of the most famous experiments of inattentional blindness, the invisible gorilla, or sometimes the moonwalking bear. Just Google either of those things if you want to be tested on your awareness, and then come back.
Okay, let's do that. Cause I'm not familiar with that. Let's see, hold on. Moonwalking bear test. Okay. I don't know if this is the right one. I don't know if this is the right one now. Hold on. Cause what? I think I might just click on something else because I think this is a whole different situation. Okay, here we go. This might be it.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Oh, girl.
Go!
The answer is 13.
13. I should have said it faster because y'all probably didn't believe me, but I had 13 in my head. I was going to say already, but it wasn't no need to say. But let's continue. I got to be fast. I thought he was going to give us a moment to answer before he answered.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Oh, what? I'm gonna tell you what I did pay attention to. Honestly, No, I did not specifically see a bear because if I would have seen a real bear, obviously my attention would have definitely switched. Now, what I did see is for whatever reason they start shifting outward, and now I know why because I see that this is the case. But now I need to go back because it wasn't really there this whole time, or were y'all just playing? I'm so done. This is so okay, so I was correct because I seen they moved out and I'm like, okay. But obviously you yeah, that was good. That was good. That was good. That's freaking funny. Oh, selective awareness. See, that's we'll get into this kind of stuff later. I'm so tickled.
Don't see the player. Your consciousness is focused on following the players and the ball, nothing else. You don't see the players in black. They're the distraction. Also, you certainly don't see the dancing gorilla or bear, whichever one. The original version of this experiment found that about 50% of people didn't notice there was a gorilla walking through the room. That's how powerfully selective our attention can be, something to remember next time you're behind the wheel. But you know who understands and exploits inattentional blindness better than anyone? Magicians. Except they call it misdirection. Famous modern magician Teller of Penn and Teller says every time you perform a magic trick, you're engaging in experimental psychology. And we can't.
But the only thing they're doing is specifically directing your attention to one thing and something that would require a great bit of your attention, which is why they're able to pull the wool, which is also how you get finessed in relationships as well, and any other type of scam in the world. It's typically what it is, you know.
Help but be the rubes. Magicians also prey on our change blindness, the psychological phenomenon in which we fail to notice changes in our environment. And no, I don't mean climate change. I mean the failure to recognize the difference between what was there a moment ago versus what is there now. For example, I have changed shirts several times since this lesson started. In a well-known and often copied experiment, sometimes called the person swap time.
What happened?
Environment and prey on our change blindness, the psychological phenomenon in which we fail to notice changes in our environment. And no, I don't mean climate change. I mean the failure to recognize the difference between what was there a moment ago versus what is there now. For example, I have changed shirts several times since this lesson started. In a well-known and often copied experiment, sometimes called the person swap, an experimenter will stop someone in the park, ask for directions, and then during some staged interruption, the original experimenter will leave and be replaced with a totally different person. Half the time, the subject doesn't even notice. Fun! One of the many perks of studying psychology, half the this lesson started. In a well-known and often copied experiment, sometimes called the person swap, an experimenter will stop someone in the park, ask for directions, and then during some staged interruption, the original experimenter will leave and be replaced with a totally different person. Half the time, the subject doesn't even notice. Fun! One of the many perks of studying psychology with me is you learn all kinds of new ways to mess with people. But while change blindness makes for some really cool parlor tricks, this failure to notice certain things can be dangerous. Say, when faulty memories lead to false eyewitness testimonies in court, or when friends get deadlocked in a he said, she said disagreement. So, my friends, use the Force, but use it wisely. As one of my favorite psychologists once advised, a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. Actually, that was Yoda. Anyway, the bottom line is, we are far less aware of what's going on around us than we think we are, and that's just when we're awake. Imagine what might slip your notice when you're half asleep, or drunk, or hypnotized, or hallucinating. That's what we're going to talk about next time. Thanks for watching this episode of Crash Course. If you
Yeah, that's why I don't understand. I don't understand how people get on like drugs. What? I guess I can understand enough because back in the day, bro, I used to get too done. High school, horrible. Even after high school, horrible. Well, pay attention, focus up, stay focused, equal mind of your business, I'm right, because it can get real fast. Alright, we on to the next episode, so